In this world, there are plots of land with oil. There are plots of land with gold. And then, there is Jerusalem. A small, arid piece of land, with no particular natural resources. That is nonetheless the most expensive and dangerous real estate on the planet. Why? Because it has something more potent than gold or oil. It has meaning. It's like a family tragedy that has spanned thousands of years, where, in the will, God seemingly promised the same beautiful, single-family home to 3 of his most beloved children. And they have not stopped fighting over the deed since. This is the city that has been built and destroyed dozens of times. The place that has seen more prayers, more tears, and more blood spilled than almost any other. A tiny stage for humanity's greatest dreams and its most brutal wars. Tonight, we will try to understand why. Welcome back, curious night owls, to Sleepy History Narratives. I am your narrator, your guide into the hilariously horrifying corners of the past. It is wonderful to have you here tonight. Our community is growing every day, a collection of inquisitive souls from all over the world, all looking for a different way to unwind. And speaking of which, let me know where you're listening from, and what time it is where you are, down in the comments. From the sleepless streets of New York, to the calm shores of California, or a city on the other side of the globe. It's always fascinating to know that as one of us is getting ready for bed, another is just starting their day, yet we are all connected by these stories. And if you enjoy these unique historical journeys, a like on the video and a subscription to the channel would be a priceless source of energy for us to keep lighting these torches into the past. Thank you so much for your support. And now, our familiar ritual begins. Find a comfortable position. Perhaps lying in bed, or settled into a soft chair. Dim the lights in your room just a little. If you have a fan, turn it on for that soft, background hum. Take a deep breath in, hold it for a moment, and slowly let it out. Let the worries of the present world dissolve. The unread emails. The meetings for tomorrow. The bills that need to be paid. Set them aside for now. They belong to another world. Not the one we are about to enter. To understand this millennia-long conflict, we will not look down from on high through the eyes of kings or prophets. We will go down to the stone-paved streets. We will smell the dust of armies and the incense of prayer. Tonight, you will not just hear about a holy war. You will join one. So, close your eyes. Relax. And let my voice be your guide. You are no longer here. You are in another place, another time. Welcome to Clermont, France, the year 1095. And a charismatic pope is about to make you an offer of salvation that you cannot refuse. You are a knight. But you are not the kind of knight from the songs and poems. You do not own a vast castle or fertile lands. You are the 3rd son of a minor lord in the south of France. Your older brothers inherited the land and the title. You inherited a good horse, a decent suit of mail, a strong sword arm, and a future filled with uncertainty. Your options are bleak. You could become a hired sword, a mercenary, fighting in the petty wars of other lords for a handful of coins. Or you could join a monastery, trading your sword for a Bible and a life of quiet prayer. Neither path appeals to the fire in your belly. You are a man with a noble name, but no future. A warrior with no war to fight. And then, Pope Urban II comes to Clermont. You stand in a massive, open field, surrounded by thousands of others. Barons, bishops, knights, and peasants. The air is electric with anticipation. The Pope, a small figure on a high platform, begins to speak. And his voice, full of passion and fury, rolls over the crowd like a thunderstorm. He speaks of a holy city, Jerusalem, the center of the world, now in the hands of the infidel. He describes, in graphic detail, the suffering of Christian pilgrims, the desecration of holy sites. He calls on you, the knights of Christendom, To stop fighting each other over petty scraps of land in Europe. He offers you a new war. A greater war. A holy war. Deus vult, he cries. God wills it. The crowd roars in response. A wave of religious fervor sweeps through you. You feel a righteous anger, a call to defend your faith. But then, the Pope, a master of psychology, makes another offer. An offer aimed not just at your soul, but at your very practical, earthly ambitions. He speaks of the East as a land of milk and honey, of silk and spices. Of untold riches waiting to be taken from the hands of a weak and decadent people. He speaks of new lands, new fiefdoms, new kingdoms for the landless knights of France. And this is the part that truly makes your heart beat faster. The promise of heaven is a wonderful, distant thing. But the promise of a castle on earth, of your own land. Your own title, that is something you can understand right now. It is the solution to every problem you have. The Pope has offered you a divine quest that also happens to be a get-rich-quick scheme. A holy pilgrimage that doubles as a land grab. It is the most brilliant recruitment pitch in history. You look around. You see the same fire in the eyes of hundreds of other landless knights just like you. The fervor is contagious. When the cry of Deus vult erupts again, you are shouting with them. Your voice raw with emotion. It is a shout for God, yes, but it is also a shout for a future, for a purpose, for a chance to be someone more than a forgotten third son. That evening, you find a priest. You confess your sins. You are given a piece of red cloth, which you crudely sew onto the front of your tunic in the shape of a cross. You have taken the cross. Your sins, you are told, are forgiven. All of them. It is a spiritual blank check. You sell your horse. You borrow money. You say goodbye to a family that is more relieved than sad to see you go. You and thousands of others, a great, chaotic river of faith and ambition, begin to march east. You are heading to the Holy Land to reclaim it for Christendom. Or so you tell yourself. You do not know that the road to heaven is paved with earthly hell. The journey to the Holy Land is not a noble pilgrimage. It is a long, chaotic, and brutal march. Your army of God is more like a slow-moving plague of locusts, consuming the resources of every land you pass through. There is hunger. There is disease. There is infighting. Many of the thousands who left France with you will never even see the walls of Jerusalem. They will be buried in unmarked graves along the way. But you endure. Driven by your faith. And by the promise of land and riches, you push forward. And then, after months that feel like years, you finally see it. Jerusalem. It sits atop its hills. Its limestone walls glowing golden under the eastern sun. It is exactly as you imagined it from the stories. A holy city. A fortress of God. The siege begins. It is a long, bloody affair. You learn the grim mathematics of siege warfare. The construction of massive wooden towers. The relentless pounding of catapults. The sting of arrows from the city's defenders. Finally, after weeks of struggle, the walls are breached. A great roar goes up from your camp. This is the moment. The final battle for the holy city. You grip your sword. Your heart pounding with a mixture of terror and holy fervor, and you charge through the broken wall alongside thousands of other crusaders. The streets are narrow. A confusing labyrinth of stone. The air is thick with smoke and screams. This is not the clean, heroic battle of the songs. This is a messy, desperate, street-by-street slaughter. You are swept up in the violent tide, convinced you are an instrument of God's wrath, cleansing the holy city of its infidels. You and a few other knights break down the door of a small shop. It is a weaver's shop, filled with looms and colorful bolts of cloth. You expect to find a Saracen warrior, a devil with a scimitar. Instead, you find a woman, her face pale with terror, clutching a small child. This is Maria, a weaver. Her eyes are wide, but in them, you see not the hatred of an enemy, but a familiar fear. Around her neck, on a simple leather cord, is a small, carved wooden cross. You freeze. A cross. The same symbol you wear on your tunic. No one told you about them. In the grand speeches back in France, there were only two kinds of people, us, the saviors, and them, the infidels. No one mentioned the thousands of local Christians, Orthodox, Armenian, Syrian, who had lived in this city for centuries, for whom this city was also the center of their universe. You back away from the shop, confused. You look down the street. You see another shop, a bakery, being ransacked. An old woman, Miriam, is trying to shield her bread from the looters. Her prayers are in a language you recognize as Hebrew. You see synagogues burning next to mosques. And you begin to understand that the simple story you were told was a lie. This city is not a simple equation. It is a complex, layered, and tragic tapestry of faiths. You stand amidst the carnage, holding your sword, its hilt shaped like the cross you wear so proudly. And for the first time, a question, cold and sharp as a dagger, pierces your righteous certainty. Is this truly God's will? The city has been taken. The battle, for now, is won. But as you look at the smoke rising over the dome of the rock, the western wall, and the church of the Holy Sepulchre, you realize a bigger battle has just begun. You have taken the city. But the question is, from whom? And why does this small piece of land mean so much to so many different people? To answer that, we must step back from the horror of this single day, and listen to the ancient, competing whispers of the stones themselves. To understand the why of Jerusalem, we must understand the memory embedded in its stones. For this small piece of land is perhaps the most spiritually crowded real estate on earth. A holy ground where every inch means everything to different people for different reasons. The story is a tapestry woven from three great threads of faith. Let us begin with the oldest of these threads. A story of kings, a temple, and a promise. This is the Jerusalem that lives in the memory of Miriam, the Jewish baker. For her people. The story begins 3,000 years ago. A warrior poet named David captures the city, then a small hilltop fortress, and makes it the capital of his united kingdom of Israel. He brings the Ark of the Covenant here, and in doing so, transforms Jerusalem from a strategic conquest into the spiritual center of the Jewish world. His son, Solomon, would build a home for God himself. He erected the first temple, a structure of legendary splendor, built with the finest cedar and purest gold. This was not merely a place of worship. It was considered the singular, physical dwelling of the divine on earth. It was the heart of the universe, the point to which all prayer was directed. For nearly 400 years, it stood as a symbol of a golden age, a testament to a sacred covenant. But in history, especially the history of Jerusalem, nothing golden is allowed to last. In 586 BC, the Babylonian army, under King Nebuchadnezzar, swept through the land. They did what conquerors do to break the spirit of a people, they destroyed their heart. The first temple was razed to the ground. Its treasures were looted. And the people of Judea were driven into exile in Babylon. This moment is perhaps the most profound trauma in Jewish history. It is the birth of the diaspora, the scattering of a people. And it is the moment when Jerusalem transforms from a home into a dream. An aching, powerful, all-consuming dream of return. The memory of what was lost becomes a central pillar of their faith. Decades later, they would return. Under the Persian king Cyrus the Great, the exiles were allowed to come back to their land. And upon the ashes of Solomon's creation, they built again. the Second Temple rose. For centuries, it stood as the renewed center of Jewish life. It was expanded by King Herod into a structure of immense beauty, a wonder of the ancient world. It was the temple that Jesus of Nazareth would have walked in. It was the heart of a vibrant and often rebellious Jewish life under Roman rule. But history, especially in Jerusalem, has a cruel habit of repeating itself. In 70 AD, after a fierce Jewish revolt, the Roman legions did what the Babylonians had done before them. They crushed the rebellion, and they burned the Second Temple to the ground, leaving it a smoldering ruin. This time, the destruction was nearly absolute. The Romans left almost nothing standing, determined to erase this center of Jewish identity from the face of the earth. Almost nothing. In 70 AD, the Roman legions burned the Second Temple to the ground, determined to erase the heart of Jewish identity from the face of the earth. They left almost nothing standing. Almost. They did not destroy the massive outer retaining wall that supported the Temple Mount platform. Perhaps it was too large, too formidable to tear down. Perhaps it was simply an oversight. Whatever the reason, this single, colossal wall of enormous, ancient stones remained. And for the next 2,000 years, for a people scattered across the globe in a long and often painful diaspora, this wall would become the single holiest site in Judaism. They call it the Western Wall. The world often calls it the Wailing Wall. For our baker, Miriam, this is the center of her universe. Her ancestors, and her ancestors' ancestors, have made the pilgrimage here. It is a place of profound and layered emotion. It is, first and foremost, a place of mourning. It is called the Wailing Wall because for centuries, Jews have come here to weep for the destruction of their two holy temples. They stand before the stones, the last remnant of a lost glory, and they recite prayers and laments. The air here is thick with the weight of 2 millennia of grief. But it is not only a place of sadness. It is a place of unyielding hope. If you were to watch the daily life at the wall, you would see a quiet, powerful ritual. People of all ages press their hands, their foreheads, against the cool, ancient surface, as if trying to feel the heartbeat of history within the stone. They pray, their voices a low, continuous murmur. And they write on tiny scraps of paper. They write down their most intimate prayers, their deepest wishes, their most secret hopes. A prayer for a sick child. A wish for peace. A plea for guidance. Then, they carefully fold the small notes and tuck them deep into the cracks and crevices between the massive stones. The wall is not just a wall. It is a sacred repository of millions of whispered secrets, promises, and pleas offered up to God. It is a direct line of communication with the divine. This single wall became the anchor for a scattered people. No matter where they lived in the world, in Spain, in Poland, in Russia, in Yemen, their hearts and their prayers were always directed towards this one spot in Jerusalem. It was the physical embodiment of their connection to their homeland and to their God. And for 2,000 years, they ended their Passover Seder with the same, powerful phrase. A phrase of pure hope. L'shana haba b'Yerushalayim. Next year in Jerusalem. That is the dream baked into every loaf of bread that Miriam pulls from her oven. It is the story her grandmother told her, a story of how to survive, how to remember, and how to hope. Her very presence here, her daily life, is a fulfillment of that 2,000-year-old prayer. For her, this land is not just a place to live. It is a promise kept. But for her neighbor, Maria the Weaver, these same streets, these same stones, hold a different, though no less powerful, set of memories. For her, the story of this city is defined not by a temple that was lost, but by a man who walked these very paths. For Miriam, the baker, the story of Jerusalem is one of ancient memory, of a lost temple, and a promise of return. But for her neighbor, Maria the Weaver, The story that echoes through these same stone streets is entirely different. For Maria, and for billions of Christians throughout history, the holiness of this city is not found in what was lost, but in a man who walked these very paths. Her map of Jerusalem is not defined by the grand Temple Mount, but by the final, agonizing footsteps of Jesus of Nazareth. For this faith, Jerusalem is the stage for the final act of the most important story ever told. It begins in an upper room, where Jesus shared a Last Supper with his disciples. It continues into a garden of ancient olive trees, Gethsemane, where he prayed in agony, knowing what was to come. It moves through the courts where he was tried and condemned. And then, it becomes a walk. A public procession of shame and suffering. The Via Dolorosa. The way of suffering. Imagine that path. A narrow, winding street crowded with merchants, soldiers, and curious onlookers. Imagine a man, his back torn by whips, forced to carry a heavy wooden cross through the city he was once hailed in as a king. Each station of the cross that pilgrims trace today is a memory of that walk, his falls, the encounters with his mother, the moment a stranger was forced to help him carry his burden. The walk ends at a rocky hill outside the city walls called Golgotha, the place of the skull. This is where he was crucified. The central, most painful, and most sacred event in the Christian faith. The moment God, in human form, is believed to have sacrificed himself for the sins of humanity. Nearby was a tomb, carved from rock, owned by a follower. It was here his body was laid to rest. And it was from this tomb, Christians believe, that he rose from the dead 3 days later, conquering death itself. These two spots, the site of the crucifixion and the site of the empty tomb, became the magnetic poles of a new world religion. Today, they are both contained within the walls of a single, sprawling, chaotic, and breathtakingly holy building, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. To walk inside it is to walk into the very heart of the Christian story. You can touch the rock of Golgotha. And you can enter the small chapel built over the tomb. This story transformed Jerusalem's meaning for the world. It was no longer just the capital of the Jewish people. It became the spiritual destination for a new, global faith. The place where salvation was won. And this created a new kind of human current, a powerful force that would reshape history. The Christian pilgrim. For centuries, believers from all over the world felt an overwhelming desire to make the journey to Jerusalem, to walk the Via Dolorosa themselves. To pray at the Holy Sepulchre. This pilgrimage was an act of ultimate devotion. But it was this very devotion, this intense desire to touch the sacred, that would, centuries later, ignite the fires of the Crusades you experienced at the beginning of our story. When access to this path was threatened, an army was born. For Maria, the cloth she weaves is not just for merchants. It is for the pilgrims who come to her city. And her faith is not tied to a wall of memory, but to an empty tomb, a symbol not of what was lost, but of what was, in her belief, gained for all time. The story of Jerusalem is a story of overlapping sacred spaces. The stones that Miriam the baker sees as the remnant of her temple are, for Maria the weaver, the backdrop to her Savior's final walk. But there is a third thread in this tapestry, a third claim upon this holy ground, just as profound and just as powerful. For Yosef, who tends to olive trees his grandfather planted on the nearby mount, the story of this city is not about a lost temple or a crucifixion. It is about a miraculous journey that connected heaven and earth, and confirmed Jerusalem's place in the heart of a new and vibrant faith, Islam. 2. For Muslims, the story begins not in Jerusalem, but in Mecca, in the 7th century AD, with the Prophet Muhammad. One night, according to Islamic tradition, the archangel Gabriel appeared to him with a mythical winged creature named the Al-Buraq, a steed as white as milk that could travel at the speed of light. This was the beginning of the Isra, the night journey. In a single, miraculous instant, Muhammad was transported from the sacred mosque in Mecca to what the Quran calls, the farthest mosque, which Muslims identify as the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. It was here, on the same holy ground where Solomon's temple once stood, that Muhammad is said to have led all the preceding prophets, Abraham, Moses, Jesus, and others, in prayer. This act established him as the final prophet in the long line of Abrahamic tradition. But the journey was not over. From a sacred rock on the Temple Mount, the foundation stone, the second part of the miracle began, the Miraj, the Ascension. From this rock, Muhammad ascended through the 7 heavens. At each level, he met and spoke with the prophets who came before him. Finally, he came into the presence of God, where he received one of the central tenets of Islam, the command for Muslims to pray 5 times a day. He then returned to Mecca before the night was over. This single, miraculous night cemented Jerusalem, or Al-Quds, the Holy One, as it is known in Arabic, as a city of immense spiritual importance. For a time, it was the first Qibla, the direction Muslims faced when they prayed, before it was changed to Mecca. It remains the 3rd holiest city in Islam, after Mecca and Medina. Centuries after that journey, the Umayyad Caliph Abd al-Malik sought to build a monument to commemorate this sacred event. And he built it directly over the foundation stone from which the Prophet is believed to have ascended. The result is one of the most iconic buildings in the world, the Dome of the Rock. Its magnificent golden dome shines like a second sun over the city. Its walls are decorated with intricate blue mosaics, bearing some of the earliest surviving inscriptions from the Quran. It is not a mosque for public prayer, but a shrine, built to enclose and protect the sacred rock, a physical testament to the moment heaven and earth touched. So for Yusuf, the olive grower, this city is intrinsically linked to the life of his prophet and the very foundation of his faith. The call to prayer that echoes from the minarets is a continuation of the same prayer Muhammad led with all the prophets on that holy site. His connection to the land is a connection to a miracle. This sacred event cemented Jerusalem's place in the heart of Islam. And for centuries to come, under the rule of caliphs and sultans, the city would be shaped by this new faith. And new monuments would rise alongside the old. The Dome of the Rock was a magnificent declaration in stone and gold, a testament to the miracle that cemented Jerusalem in the heart of Islam. A short time later, right next to it on the same holy plateau, the Al-Aqsa Mosque was built, becoming one of the most important centers of prayer and scholarship in the Muslim world. The entire compound became known as the Haram al-Sharif, the noble sanctuary. But for Yusuf the olive grower, this story is not just one of grand monuments. It is a story of daily life, of coexistence, and of a complex, often misunderstood, social contract. It is the story of living under the shade of his ancestral olive tree. When the first Muslim armies, under the Caliph Umar, conquered Jerusalem in the 7th century, they did not destroy the city. Umar, a figure revered for his piety and justice, entered the city peacefully. He famously refused to pray inside the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, fearing that future Muslims might use his act as a pretext to turn it into a mosque. Instead, he established a pact, a set of rules that would, for centuries, define the relationship between the city's Muslim rulers and its Christian and Jewish inhabitants. This was the concept of the dhimmi, or the protected people. Under this system, Jews and Christians, as people of the book, were allowed to practice their own religion. Their holy sites were, for the most part, protected. They were not forced to convert. However, this was not a modern society of equals. In exchange for this protection and religious freedom, non-Muslims were required to pay a special tax, the jizya. They had to accept a status subordinate to Muslims, with certain restrictions on building new houses of worship or publicly displaying their religious symbols. It was a system of institutionalized tolerance, but also institutionalized inequality. A complex, pragmatic solution to the problem of governing a city holy to 3 different faiths. For long periods, particularly under the Umayyad and early Abbasid caliphates, this system allowed for a relatively peaceful, if sometimes tense, coexistence. Miriam's ancestors could pray at their wall. Maria's ancestors could worship at their sepulchre. And Yusuf's ancestors could pray at their mosque. The city was a cosmopolitan center. Scholars from all three faiths exchanged ideas. Merchants from different backgrounds traded in the bustling markets. The daily rhythms of life, baking bread, weaving cloth, tending to olive groves, continued, creating a shared, fragile reality. But this tolerance was always fragile, dependent on the whims of the ruler in charge. There were periods of intense persecution. In the early 11th century, the Fatimid Caliph al-Hakim, a ruler often described as eccentric and cruel, ordered the destruction of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, an act that sent shockwaves through the Christian world and would later be used as a primary justification for the First Crusade. So life was a constant negotiation, a dance of accommodation and survival. Yusuf's great-grandfather would tell him stories of this history. He would point to their oldest olive tree, its trunk gnarled and ancient. This tree, he would say, has seen caliphs and crusaders. It has seen times of peace when we shared our oil with our neighbors, and times of war when we hid in fear. But through it all, it has remained. It still bears fruit. This complex, overlapping, and deeply human history is the Jerusalem that Yusuf knows. Not a city of one truth, but a city of many truths. All living, breathing, and struggling on the same small patch of earth. But this intense, overlapping piety, this concentration of so much meaning in one place, created more than just tension. It created a market. A bizarre, and often deceitful, market for the divine. This intense, overlapping piety, this concentration of so much meaning in one small city, created more than just tension and war. It created a market. And the first and most numerous customers in this divine marketplace were the pilgrims. Imagine you are one of them. A devout Christian from a small village in France in the 12th century. You have committed a terrible sin, or perhaps you are seeking a miracle for a sick child, or maybe you are simply so filled with faith that you must walk in the footsteps of your Savior. You decide to undertake the greatest journey a person of your time can make, a pilgrimage to Jerusalem. Forget a modern package tour with flights and hotels. This is the original adventure travel. And the risks are very real. The journey could take years. You walk across Europe, facing bandits, bad weather, and suspicious locals. You might save for months to board a cramped, disease-ridden ship to cross the Mediterranean, a voyage where storms or pirates could end your holy quest at any moment. You are one of thousands on the road. All driven by the same powerful need to reach the center of the world. After months of hardship, you finally arrive. As you approach the gates of Jerusalem, you are not met by angels, but by the chaotic, bustling reality of a medieval city. It is loud, crowded, and it smells of spices, animals, and humanity. And almost immediately, you are approached by a local guide. He speaks broken Latin, but his message is clear. For a small fee, he can show you the real Jerusalem. He knows the authentic sites, the secret spots, not the ones for the common tourists. He is, in essence, the world's first tour operator promising an off-the-beaten-path experience. You follow him through the labyrinthine streets. He points out the very stone where Jesus stumbled. The corner where a specific miracle occurred. Is it true? Who knows? But you want to believe, so you listen, enthralled. He takes you to the markets, a vibrant, noisy explosion of commerce. Here, you can buy your holy souvenirs. Small bottles claiming to hold water from the River Jordan. Pouches filled with sacred soil from the Mount of Olives. And of course, crosses. Thousands of them. Carved from olive wood. Your guide assures you the wood comes from the very trees of Gethsemane. You buy one for everyone back home. Finally, he leads you to your ultimate destination. The Church of the Holy Sepulchre. You are overwhelmed. The sheer number of other pilgrims, the competing chants of different Christian sects, Latin, Greek, Armenian, all echoing in the vast, dark space. You wait in a long line for your chance to enter the small tomb, to kneel for a fleeting second in the holiest place you can imagine. Your journey is complete. You have done it. You have reached the heart of your faith. You leave the city with your soul feeling lighter, but your coin purse considerably lighter as well. You have your olive wood cross, your bottle of holy water, and stories to tell for the rest of your life. But for some pilgrims, this wasn't enough. A simple wooden cross was a fine souvenir, but to prove true devotion, to gain real spiritual power, you needed something more. Something that had touched the divine itself. And if a simple olive wood cross wasn't enough to prove your devotion, there was a whole other market available. A black market for the divine. Welcome to the world of holy relics. But for the truly devout, the truly desperate, or the truly wealthy, a simple olive wood cross was not enough. It was a nice souvenir, a symbol. But it wasn't the real thing. To get closer to God, you needed something that God, or at least one of his saints, had actually touched. Welcome to the medieval market for holy relics. A bizarre, unregulated, and wildly profitable industry built entirely on faith, bone fragments, and very creative storytelling. A relic, in simple terms, was a physical remnant of a holy person or a sacred event. A piece of a saint's bone, a lock of hair, a thread from their robe. It was believed that these objects retained a portion of the saint's holiness, their divine power. They could heal the sick, protect a city from invasion, or shorten your stay in purgatory. A church that possessed a powerful relic became an instant pilgrimage destination. A spiritual hotspot that attracted thousands of visitors and, more importantly, their donations. It was the ultimate business model. And the ultimate product, the holy grail of all relics, was a piece of the true cross. The story began in the 4th century, when Helena, the mother of Emperor Constantine, traveled to Jerusalem. According to legend, she excavated the site of the crucifixion and discovered 3 crosses. To determine which one was the true cross, a sick woman was brought to touch each one. The first 2 had no effect. When she touched the 3rd, she was instantly healed. It was a miracle. It was also the beginning of a fantastic business opportunity. The true cross was broken up. Its pieces distributed to churches and monasteries across the Christian world. Owning a splinter of the cross on which Jesus died was the ultimate status symbol, a divine insurance policy. Kings and queens would pay fortunes for a tiny sliver. Knights would carry them into battle, believing it made them invincible. There was just one small, logistical problem with this. There were a lot of them. So many, in fact, that the 16th century reformer John Calvin, a man not known for his sense of humor, once sarcastically remarked that if you collected all the alleged pieces of the true cross scattered across Europe, you would have enough wood to build a large ship. How was this possible? The Church had a convenient explanation: the miraculous multiplication of the relic. The wood, they argued, could be endlessly divided without diminishing the original whole, a miracle in itself. A more cynical observer might call it the world's first and most successful franchise model. Every cathedral, every monastery, had to have one. It was a competitive market. The abbey down the road has a splinter of the cross? Well, we need one too, preferably a slightly bigger splinter. The demand was infinite, and so, miraculously, was the supply. And this was just the beginning. This was the entry-level product in the bizarre catalogue of holy artifacts. But why stop at wood? The market for divine artifacts was creative and had a diverse product line, catering to every possible need and budget. But why stop at wood? The market for divine artifacts was creative, competitive, and had a diverse product line that catered to every possible spiritual need. If a splinter of the true cross was the entry-level product, then the premium collection was far more intimate. For the truly discerning collector, the market offered relics with a more personal touch. Let us browse the catalog. First, we have vials containing the milk of the Virgin Mary, a miraculous substance that never seemed to spoil. Cynics might suggest it was just chalk dust mixed with water or rock milk, a form of calcium carbonate, but for the faithful, it was a direct connection to the Mother of God. Multiple churches across Europe claimed to have an authentic sample, creating a sort of spiritual custody battle. Next item. Perhaps you are looking for something less tangible? More atmospheric? We can offer you a bottle containing the breath of Jesus Christ, captured as he exhaled on the cross. Or, for the avian enthusiast, a feather, dropped from the wing of the Archangel Gabriel during the Annunciation. How does one bottle a breath or catch an angel's feather? Do not ask such logical questions. That is not how faith works. But the real bestsellers, the items that truly drove the market, were body parts. The body of a saint was not meant to be buried and left in peace. It was meant to be parted out like a used chariot, its components distributed to generate maximum holiness and revenue. A saint's finger bone, encased in a golden reliquary, could become the centerpiece of a cathedral. A tooth could protect a city. John the Baptist was a particularly popular source. At one point, at least a dozen different churches claimed to possess his severed head. It was a statistical miracle. And then there was the most bizarre, the most controversial, and for a time, one of the most revered relics in all of Christendom. The holy prepuce. Yes. The foreskin of Jesus. Believed to be the only part of his physical body left on earth after his ascension. Multiple churches, from France to Italy, claimed to possess the authentic article. They held annual festivals in its honor. Theological debates raged for centuries over which one was real. In a world of strange and sacred objects, this was perhaps the strangest. This all seems absurd to the modern mind, but the logic of the time was powerful. It was believed that the divine power of a saint, their ability to intercede with God, resided in their physical remains. To possess a relic was to possess a direct telephone line to heaven. This belief fueled a fierce competition. Cities and monasteries would go to war, not for land, but for the bones of a popular saint. There was even a term for it, furta sacra, or holy theft. Monks would stage elaborate heists to steal the remains of a saint from another church, believing they were doing God's work by bringing the holy asset to a more deserving home. The economy of faith was a cutthroat business. It was a world of miracles and marketing, of devotion and deception, where a good story was worth more than gold, and a sliver of bone could be the most valuable object on earth. But this bizarre economy, built on faith and bone fragments, would eventually fade, replaced by a new kind of hunt in the Holy Land. A hunt driven not by a desire for heavenly salvation, but by an equally powerful new religion, science. It was a hunt not for the bones of saints, but for the bones of history itself. Welcome to the age of the archaeologist. These new crusaders, the gentlemen archaeologists of the 19th century, came to Jerusalem with Bibles, maps, and a supreme sense of confidence. They were here to bring the light of Western science into the dark corners of the past. Their methods, however, were often anything but enlightened. Their primary tool for uncovering the sacred past was, surprisingly often, brute force. Let us take, for example, the work of Captain Charles Warren, a British Royal Engineer sent by the Palestine Exploration Fund in 1867. His mission was one of the most ambitious, to explore and map the foundations of the Temple Mount itself. There was one major problem. The Temple Mount, the Haram al-Sharif, was and is a sacred, active place of Muslim worship. The Ottoman authorities, quite reasonably, forbade any Christian foreigner from digging on top of it. A normal archaeologist might have been deterred. But Charles Warren was not a normal archaeologist. He was an engineer. And engineers solve problems. His solution was as brilliant as it was mad. If he could not dig down, he would dig across. Warren and his team began by digging a series of deep, vertical shafts into the ground, a considerable distance away from the Temple Mount's outer walls. These were not gentle trenches. These were deep, dark, and dangerously unsupported pits. Sometimes plunging more than 80 feet straight down through layers of ancient debris. Once at the bottom of a shaft, they would begin digging horizontally, creating narrow, claustrophobic tunnels aimed squarely at the foundation walls of the temple. They were, in essence, trying to sneak up on history from underneath. Imagine the work. Crawling for hours in pitch-black tunnels, barely wide enough for a man's shoulders, with the weight of 2,000 years of history pressing down from above. The air was foul. A mixture of damp earth and the unmistakable stench of ancient, disturbed sewers they sometimes had to tunnel through. The risk of collapse was constant. It was less science and more a form of very determined, very well-dressed burrowing. Warren's men were crawling through the literal garbage of empires. All in the hope of touching a stone that might have been part of Herod's temple, or even Solomon's. This ends justify the means approach was not unique to Warren. It was the spirit of the age. For many of these early explorers, if a collapsed passage or a sealed doorway blocked the path to a potential tomb or a rumored artifact, the answer was not patient excavation. It was gunpowder. Yes, archaeology by dynamite. Small charges would be used to clear debris, blasting away centuries of historical context in a single, satisfying explosion. In their zealous quest to find one big, headline-grabbing artifact, they often destroyed the invaluable clues that surrounded it, layers of pottery, smaller structures, ash layers from previous destructions, all the things a modern archaeologist would treasure. It was a form of historical bull in a china shop. The irony was profound. In their desperate search to prove the Bible was real, they were often destroying the very evidence that could have provided a clearer picture of the world in which it was written. They came seeking truth, but they were often too impatient to listen for its whispers. They preferred the loud bang of discovery. But sometimes, when they couldn't find the proof they were looking for, even with their tunnels and their dynamite, these determined men simply invented it. The bizarre economy of holy relics, built on faith and bone fragments, would eventually fade with the Middle Ages. The world moved on. The Renaissance, the Reformation, and the Enlightenment brought new ways of thinking. But the obsession with Jerusalem did not disappear. It simply changed its costume. The 19th century arrived, and with it came the steam engine, the telegraph, and a powerful new religion, science. And this new religion sent forth its own kind of crusaders to the Holy Land. They did not wear chainmail, they wore tweed suits and pith helmets. They did not carry swords. They carried measuring tapes, survey equipment, and a heavy, leather-bound Bible. They were the first modern archaeologists, explorers, and military surveyors from the great empires of Europe, Britain, France, and Germany. They came to Jerusalem not to pray for miracles, but to dig for facts. Or so they claimed. In reality, their motivations were a complex cocktail of science, faith, and national pride. On the one hand, there was a genuine scientific desire to map, measure, and understand the historical city. They wanted to create the first accurate maps of Jerusalem, to document its ancient structures, to apply the new, rational methods of European science to this ancient land. On the other hand, and perhaps more powerfully, many of them came to prove the Bible. For these devout Victorian gentlemen, the Bible was not a book of faith, it was a work of history. And their mission was to find the physical evidence to confirm its stories. They were not just digging for pottery shards, they were digging for the walls of King David, the steps of Solomon's temple, the very tomb of Christ. Their scientific quest was fueled by a deeply religious dogma. They were a new kind of pilgrim, seeking a different kind of relic. And, of course, there was empire. This was the peak of European colonialism. To a British officer, a French diplomat, or a German scholar, Jerusalem was not a living city filled with people. It was a giant, dusty ruin waiting to be discovered and saved by the superior intellect of the West. It was a treasure chest, and finding a major artifact was not just a scientific victory, but a national one. A prize to be shipped back to the British Museum or the Louvre. In 1865, the Palestine Exploration Fund, or PF, was founded in London, with the patronage of Queen Victoria herself. Its stated goal was the scientific investigation of the Holy Land. Its unstated goal was to ensure British influence in a strategically vital part of the world. These new crusaders looked upon the city with a mixture of romantic awe and colonial condescension. They saw themselves as rational men, here to bring order to a land they considered neglected and decayed. But these men came with maps, Bibles, and a sense of imperial destiny. And their primary tool for uncovering the sacred past was often surprisingly crude. The men who came to Jerusalem in the 19th century, with their Bibles and their measuring tapes, were driven by a powerful desire to find physical proof of the stories they held sacred. The patrons back home in London, Paris, and Berlin who funded these expeditions weren't paying for maps of ancient sewers. They wanted headlines. They wanted artifacts. They wanted to see the name of King David carved in stone. This immense pressure to produce results, combined with a public eager to believe, created the perfect market for a different kind of industry. An industry of very creative forgeries. If you couldn't find history, why not simply make it? Enter one of the most fascinating and tragic figures in the history of archaeological scandal, Moses Wilhelm Schapira. Schapira was a well-known antiquities dealer in Jerusalem in the late 1800s. He was a master salesman, a charismatic figure who knew exactly what his wealthy European and American clients were looking for. He had sold them countless ancient pottery pieces and Hebrew manuscripts. But in 1883, he announced his greatest discovery yet. A discovery that, if real, would be one of the most important in biblical history. He claimed that a group of Bedouins had found a remarkable artifact in a cave near the Dead Sea. It was a collection of 15 leather strips, covered in an ancient form of Hebrew script. The text, Schapira declared, was an alternate version of the Book of Deuteronomy, possibly even a manuscript written by Moses himself. The world of biblical scholarship exploded with excitement. Schapira brought his leather strips to Europe. Scholars, experts, and museum directors flocked to see them. The strips were old, dark, and brittle, and smelled of ancient bitumen, as if they had been preserved for millennia. The text was sensational. It included a slightly different version of the Ten Commandments and details that seemed to predate the standard biblical text. Was this it? An original source? A manuscript from the time of Moses? The British Museum entered into serious negotiations to purchase the strips for the astronomical sum of £1 million. Schapira was on the verge of unimaginable fame and fortune. His name would be spoken alongside the great discoverers of history. But a French scholar, a brilliant and skeptical man named Charles Clermont-Ganneau, had his doubts. He meticulously examined the strips. The leather, he agreed, was genuinely ancient, likely cut from the margin of a real Torah scroll. But the writing was too fresh. He argued that the strips had been artificially aged. The text, he claimed, had been written recently onto the old leather by a master forger who was trying to imitate an ancient script, but made subtle, modern mistakes. He declared the Schapira strips to be a clumsy and audacious forgery. The verdict was swift and brutal. The world's leading experts sided with Clermont-Ganneau. The British Museum immediately withdrew its offer. The press, which had celebrated Shapira just weeks before, now turned on him. He was labeled a charlatan, a con man, a disgrace. His reputation was destroyed. His business, ruined. Heartbroken, disgraced, and bankrupt, Moses Shapira wandered Europe. In March of 1884, he checked into a small hotel in Rotterdam and took his own life. It was a tragic end to a spectacular story. But the story itself has a final, strange twist. After Shapira's death, the infamous leather strips disappeared. To this day, no one knows for sure where they are. And in recent years, some scholars have begun to wonder, what if the 19th century experts were wrong? What if the Shapira strips were actually real? And the world had dismissed one of the greatest discoveries of all time? We may never know. Shapira's story was the most famous, but it was not unique. The 19th and 20th century saw a wave of clever forgeries coming out of the Holy Land, all designed to feed the insatiable appetite for biblical proof. Ossuaries, or bone boxes, would appear with names like James, son of Joseph, brother of Jesus, carved on the side, causing massive excitement before being revealed as fakes. The obsession with finding the past was so strong. It created a market for a past that never existed. But the obsession with Jerusalem wasn't just about finding its past or proving its holy texts. For some, it was about being present for its future. Specifically, its very final future. The obsession with Jerusalem, you see, was never just about digging up its past or proving its holy texts. For many throughout history, and even today, the real obsession is with its future. Specifically, its very final, very spectacular future. What dreams and fears are hidden in each ancient stone? For the three great Abrahamic faiths, Jerusalem is not just a holy city. It is the designated stage for the final act of human history. It is the place where the world, as we know it, is prophesied to end. Let's begin with the Jewish perspective. For millennia, Jewish eschatology, the theology of the end times, has centered on the coming of the Messiah. It is believed that a future king, a descendant of King David, will arrive in Jerusalem. He will gather the exiled Jewish people from the four corners of the earth, rebuild the third temple on the Temple Mount, and reign over a new messianic age of universal peace and knowledge. For this belief, Jerusalem is the necessary stage for the ultimate redemption. For Christians, the prophecies are just as dramatic, and just as geographically specific. They too await the return of a king, the second coming of Jesus Christ. It is believed he will return to the Mount of Olives, the very spot from which he ascended to heaven. His return will trigger the final battle between good and evil, Armageddon. After this great conflict, he will sit in judgment over all of humanity, the living and the dead, and establish God's kingdom on earth, centered in a new Jerusalem. For this belief, Jerusalem is the battlefield and the courtroom for the final judgment of all souls. And for Islam, Jerusalem also holds a central place in the final, apocalyptic drama. Islamic tradition holds that in the end times, the Prophet Isa, Jesus, will return to earth. He will descend near Damascus, and then travel to Jerusalem. It is here that he will confront and defeat the Dajjal, the Islamic equivalent of the Antichrist. The Dome of the Rock and the Al-Aqsa Mosque are also central to the events of Yom al-Qiyamah, the day of resurrection, when all of humanity will be gathered for the final judgment. For this belief, Jerusalem is the holy ground where the final victory over evil will take place. So, let's recap this cosmic real estate situation. You have three different final acts. For three different stories, with different protagonists and different outcomes. But they all insist on using the exact same, very small, very crowded stage. It is the ultimate scheduling conflict. One group is waiting for the Messiah to arrive and build a temple. Another is waiting for their Messiah to return and preside over the final judgment. A third is waiting for their version of that same Messiah to return and defeat the ultimate evil. All on the same few acres of contested ground. This incredible, overlapping, and mutually exclusive set of prophecies is one of the key reasons why Jerusalem is a permanent point of tension. It is a city living under the constant weight of apocalyptic expectation. These weren't just abstract theological ideas debated in monasteries. For some, they were a literal, urgent roadmap. And they decided to get to the destination early. To get a good seat for the end of the world. These weren't just abstract theological ideas debated in monasteries or whispered in churches. For some, these prophecies were not a metaphor. They were a schedule. A divine itinerary. And throughout history, various groups of intensely devout, and sometimes profoundly strange, people decided to get to the destination early. To get a good seat for the end of the world. Welcome to Jerusalem's Apocalypse Club. Membership is exclusive, and the meetings are frequently postponed. This phenomenon has repeated itself for centuries. Whenever a great plague swept through Europe, or a new war broke out, or a particularly odd-looking comet appeared in the sky, a preacher somewhere would declare that the end of days was nigh, and that the faithful must gather in Jerusalem to await the final trumpet. Entire villages in medieval Germany would sometimes sell all their possessions, abandon their farms, and begin a long, disastrous march to the Holy Land, fully expecting the heavens to part the moment they arrived. Of course, the heavens did not part. They usually just arrived, starving and destitute, to the confusion of the local authorities. But perhaps the most fascinating and well-documented of these doomsday groups was a collection of devout Americans from Chicago. In 1881, a wealthy lawyer named Horatio Spafford, a man who had already suffered immense personal tragedy, became convinced that the second coming was imminent. He and a group of about 13 families sold everything they owned, left America behind, and moved to Jerusalem to await Christ's return. They called themselves the Overcomers. The local Arabs simply called them the Americans. They formed a utopian community known as the American Colony. They did not work for profit. Their goal was purely to live a simple, pious life of charity and prayer, and to be on hand to greet Jesus when he descended upon the Mount of Olives. Their dream was one of biblical purity. The reality was Ottoman Palestine. They were met with suspicion, harsh living conditions, and diseases they had no immunity to. But they persevered. And they did something remarkable. Unlike many of the crusaders and conquerors before them, they engaged in profound acts of charity. They opened a soup kitchen, a hospital, an orphanage. They helped everyone, regardless of faith, Jews, Christians, and Muslims alike. In a city defined by division, this small group of apocalypse watchers created a rare island of shared humanity. They waited. And they waited. They sang their hymns. They did their good works. Jesus did not return. The world did not end. And what became of this devout, utopian community founded to await the end of days? It became a luxury hotel. The American Colony Hotel still exists today in Jerusalem, one of the most famous five-star hotels in the city. A beautiful, historic building with a lovely courtyard, where diplomats and journalists now sip expensive cocktails. A five-star testament to a failed apocalypse. This is the recurring tragic comedy of Jerusalem. It is a city that inspires such powerful dreams of a final, divine conclusion. But history, so far, has always had other plans. But not everyone who came to Jerusalem to await the end was content to simply wait, pray, and open a hotel. Some believed the final act needed a little push. The story of the American colony in Jerusalem is a curious footnote, a tale of earnest, if misguided, faith. They came to wait for the end, and when it didn't arrive, they adapted. Their utopian dream slowly turning into a luxury hotel. It's a peaceful, almost quaint story. But not everyone who came to Jerusalem to await the end was content to simply wait, pray, and serve soup. Some believed the final act of God's divine plan needed a little push. This is where the line between faith and a dangerous, stubborn obsession can become terrifyingly thin. It is the belief that God's timeline is not just a schedule to be watched, but a script with certain cues. And if human beings can trigger those cues, they can force the final act to begin. They can, in essence, hasten the apocalypse. This is not a new idea. It has been a powerful undercurrent in the history of this city for centuries, making it a hotspot for more than just prayer. For some fundamentalist Christians, particularly within the movement known as Christian Zionism, the prophecies are clear. Before Jesus can return, certain events must happen. The Jewish people must be gathered in the land of Israel, and crucially, the third temple must be rebuilt on the Temple Mount. This belief has led to strong political support for the State of Israel and for Jewish movements that seek to gain control of the Temple Mount, believing they are helping to set the stage for the Second Coming. On the Jewish side, there exist small but incredibly fervent groups of activists whose entire existence is dedicated to preparing for the construction of the Third Temple. They create the sacred vessels, weave the priestly garments, and study the ancient architectural plans. Some even actively advocate for the removal of the Dome of the Rock and Al-Aqsa Mosque to clear the way. For them, rebuilding the temple is not just a dream, it is a divine commandment necessary to bring about the Messianic age. For some Muslims, certain traditions speak of a final, apocalyptic battle in and around Jerusalem that will precede the Day of Judgment, a battle that will involve the return of Isa, or Jesus, to defeat a false Messiah, the Dajjal. Militant groups have sometimes seized upon these prophecies to justify their own acts of violence, believing they are soldiers in this final, cosmic war. And where do all these dangerous, world-ending prophecies converge? They all meet at the same, 37-acre patch of contested ground. The Temple Mount, or the Haram al-Sharif. It is a place of almost impossible theological density. A location where one faith's ultimate act of redemption, the rebuilding of the temple, is another faith's ultimate act of desecration. This is the truth hidden within Jerusalem's ancient stones. The dreams of one group are often the nightmares of another. This volatile mix of prophecy and politics, of faith and firepower, is what makes peace in Jerusalem so fragile. It is a city wired with cosmic tripwires, where the actions of a few zealots could potentially ignite a conflict of global proportions. And yet, that is not the whole story. This volatile mix makes peace seem impossible. And yet, even in this city of extremes, moments of shared humanity have always found a way to bloom. Like stubborn flowers growing between the cracks of ancient stones. This volatile mix of prophecy and politics, of faith and firepower, makes peace seem impossible. A city forever on the edge of a holy war. And yet, that is not the whole story. It has never been the whole story. Even in this city of extremes, moments of shared humanity have always found a way to bloom, like stubborn flowers growing between the cracks of ancient stones. Imagine a spring morning in Jerusalem. A crisis has just passed. The soldiers have withdrawn, the immediate threat has faded, and the city breathes a collective sigh of relief. The air, once thick with tension, is now filled with the familiar sounds of life returning. The great bells of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre ring out, their deep, bronze tones echoing across the old city. At the same time, from the minarets of the Haram al-Sharif, the call to prayer rises, a melodic, soaring voice. And from the synagogues in the Jewish quarter, you can hear the faint sound of sacred songs being chanted. For a moment, these three distinct sounds do not clash. They mingle in the morning air, creating a strange and beautiful symphony. Down in the winding stone streets, the people emerge from their homes. They begin to clean up the debris together, mending what was broken, sharing what little food they have left. There is Miriam, the Jewish baker. Her oven is one of the first to be lit, its warmth and the smell of fresh bread a symbol of returning normalcy. A crowd of children gathers, their faces smudged with dirt, their eyes wide with hunger. They are Christian children, Muslim children, and Jewish children. To Miriam, at this moment, they are all just children. She breaks off pieces of warm bread and hands them out to everyone. Her gesture a simple act of shared survival. Across the way, Yusef, the Muslim olive grower, has brought out a jar of his freshly pressed oil. He calls over his neighbors, Maria's family included. He lets them dip bread into the green gold liquid, a taste of the land itself, a taste of its enduring ability to provide. The olive tree his ancestors planted has survived another war. And Maria, the Christian weaver, sits at her loom. She sees an old woman, a stranger of a different faith, weeping quietly because her home was damaged. Maria takes a simple white scarf from her shop. A scarf the color of hope, and gently drapes it over the old woman's shoulders. It is a small act, a silent conversation of shared grief and comfort. In that rare, precious moment, a profound realization settles over the community. They may pray in different ways, to different prophets, and hold different histories in their hearts. But they all love this same small piece of land. They all feel the same sun on their faces. And they all share the same, simple dream, a peaceful tomorrow for their children. These moments are beautiful. They are real. But they are also fragile. They are small flowers growing in the cracks of ancient, unmovable stones. Nourished by goodwill but always threatened by the weight of the history around them. And it is the story of the stones themselves, of the memories they hold, that we must now understand to find our final lesson. These moments of peace are beautiful. They are real. And they are tragically fragile. They are small flowers that bloom in the cracks of ancient, unmovable stones, always at risk of being crushed by the weight of history. And it is the story of the stones themselves, and the memories they hold, that we must now understand to find our final lesson. Why is this city the heart of an endless conflict? After this long journey through crusades and caliphates, through prayers and prophecies, the final, surprising truth is this: the endless conflict in Jerusalem is not, and has never truly been, about the land itself. It is not about the dirt, the rocks, or even the olive trees. It is a war over what the land means. It is a battle of memory. Imagine three invisible, sacred maps, all laid on top of one another, over the same small city grid. When Miriam the baker walks down a narrow, stone-paved street, her map shows her the path that King David walked. The stones beneath her feet are the foundation of the temple, the center of her universe. Her memory is one of a golden age and a promise of return. When Maria the weaver walks that exact same street, her map shows her the Via Dolorosa, the path of her Savior's suffering. The stones beneath her feet are stained with a sacred memory of sacrifice and resurrection. Her hope is for a heavenly kingdom. And when Yusef the olive grower walks that same street, his map shows him the path to the Haram al-Sharif, the site of his prophet's miraculous night journey to heaven. The stones beneath his feet are a testament to a divine revelation. His faith is a story of culmination and finality. The stones are the same. The stories are not. This is why the conflict is so intractable. It is not a negotiation over territory that can be divided by a line on a map. It is a conflict between dreams, between memories, between sacred promises. It is a zero-sum game of the soul. For one group's ultimate dream to be realized, for example, the rebuilding of the temple, it is often seen as the ultimate nightmare for another. An act of desecration that would erase their own sacred story from the landscape. Every stone holds these overlapping, and often conflicting, dreams and fears. The stones themselves remain silent. They are neutral. They have witnessed it all. The rise and fall of empires, the prayers of 1,000 generations. The blood of conquerors and the tears of the conquered. They hold all the dreams of a peaceful home and all the fears of losing it. They are not holy in and of themselves. They are made holy by the infinite dreams that human beings have projected onto them. And that is the final, tragic, and beautiful lesson of Jerusalem. It is a testament not to the wrath of God, but to the power of human memory and the desperate, enduring need to have a place to call home. And so, the stones remain, bearing the weight of all these stories. They keep their secrets. And perhaps, in the quiet of our own minds, we can find a small piece of the peace that this city has always longed for. And so, the stones remain, bearing the weight of all these stories. They keep their secrets. And perhaps, in the quiet of our own minds, we can find a small piece of the peace that this city has always longed for. The whispers of Jerusalem have faded for tonight. But there are other histories, other worlds, waiting in the shadows. Perhaps our next journey together will take us to the lawless, dusty towns of the American Wild West. Or maybe we will walk the blood-soaked grounds of the Colosseum, to understand the life of a gladiator. Or perhaps we will explore the secret life of a pirate on the high seas. But those are stories for another time. For tonight, your journey through the holy city is complete. Let the memory of the ancient walls fade into mist. Let the sound of prayers and the cries of battle fall silent. You are here. In your own quiet space. You are safe. You are warm. You are at peace. All the conflicts are over. All the stories have been told. All that is left now is rest. Deep, quiet, and profound rest. May your dreams be peaceful. Good night.
you.